Hi guys, today we're doing a lessons on the Renaissance and how it began. So make sure you look at your table of contents to see where you're doing these Cornell notes on what history notebook page. Before I begin with humanism, I'm going to give you guys a little information on what is the Renaissance. Now please note that these notes right here on the Renaissance, the beginning, these are notes that you need to highlight. Okay, so add these to your Cornell notes and make sure these are highlighted notes. So here's questions, here are answers, and let me go ahead and go through some of them. What is the Renaissance? It is a historical period known as the rebirth of interest in learning and the arts. Keep in mind that at the end of the Middle Ages, people were down. It was a dark time. Many people died during the Black Death. And when the Renaissance started, it was a rebirth. People felt alive. They were excited again about many components, including writing, art, and you'll see how that plays in as the lesson progresses. Another information about the Renaissance at the beginning. Who was the Italian banker who used his wealth to make his city more beautiful than other cities and a center of learning? That would be Cosimo de' Medici. And you'll learn about the Medici family, and we'll talk more about this family. What family led the political, economic, and cultural growth of Florence? The Medicis, which helped Florence become an influential Italian city during the Renaissance. What did Marco Polo do? He traveled the Silk Road from Italy to China and later wrote a book that inspired other Italians to begin trading with China. Keep in mind that Marco Polo's journey, when he came back, his description of the journey, it made Europeans very curious about Asia. Okay. So at the time period referring to the art and learning of ancient Greek and Roman cultures is known as classical. The discovery of classical writings, such as Plato and Thucydides, this causes scholars to long for a renewal of classical culture. Okay, so the discovery of these classical writings, this made it so that scholars longed for classical culture. The reopening of the Silk Road, it brought an increase in trade and the spread of new ideas. Make sure you pause my screencast to make sure and get all your notes down. Humanism. What is humanism? A focus on individual achievement, an appreciation of classics in history. Humanism also included poetry, history, and public speaking, which were important subjects to study. An encouragement to have a variety of skills like art, science, writing, public speaking. Ancient Greek and Roman writings were sources of inspiration. And talented writers and artists were honored. In addition, a desire to learn for one's own enrichment, not just for religion. So religion kind of plays a back burner in the Renaissance, and it becomes more of what the individual does. The Renaissance began in northern Italy. And in the book, in Dante's The Divine Comedy, which is a book, Dante used the vernacular, which is a common language, vernacular meaning common language, to describe Italian society. So these are some important notes. Make sure that you get these down and include them in your history notebook. You can always pause and make sure you highlight these. What I'd like you to do is also include 10 facts on the Renaissance and how it began from the reading. So the Renaissance is generally considered to have started in Florence, Italy, around the years 1350 to 1400. The start of the Renaissance was also the end of the Middle Ages. Okay. Humanism. Humanism, one of the big changes in Renaissance, was in the basic way people thought about things. In the Middle Ages, people thought that life was supposed to be hard. They grew up thinking that life was nothing but hard work and war. However, around the 1300s, the people in Florence, Italy, began to think differently about life. They studied the writings and works of the Greeks and the Romans and realized that earlier civilizations had lived differently. The new way of thinking was called humanism. Now people thought that life could be enjoyable and they could have comforts. They started to think that people should be educated and things like art, music, and science could make life better for everyone. This was a real change in the way people thought. Florence, Italy. At the start of the Renaissance, Italy was divided up into a number of powerful city-states. These were areas of land that were ruled by a large city. Each city-state had its own government. One of the major city-states was Florence. The government that ran Florence was a republic, like ancient Rome. This meant that the citizens elected their own leader. In the late 1300s, Florence had become a rich city. Wealthy merchants and businessmen had the money to hire artisans and craftspeople. This inspired competitions among artists and thinkers. Art began to flourish and new thoughts began to emerge. In the 1400s, the Medici family came into power in Florence. They were wealthy bankers and helped the arts along by sponsoring many artists and using their personal funds to further the humanist movement. Francesco Petrarca is often called the father of humanism. He was a scholar and a poet who lived in Florence in the 1300s. He studied poets and philosophers from ancient Rome, such as Cicero and Virgil. His ideas and poetry became an inspiration to many writers and poets throughout all of Europe, and the Renaissance spread. Giotto was a painter in Florence, Italy. He was the first painter to break away from the standard Byzantine-style paintings of the Middle Ages and try something new. He painted objects and people as they actually looked in nature. Previously, artists had all painted more abstract paintings that didn't look real at all. Giotto is said to have started the Renaissance in art with his new style of realistic paintings. Dante. Another major contributor to the start of the Renaissance was Dante Alighieri. He lived in Florence and wrote the Divine Comedy in early 1300s. The book is considered to be the greatest literary work ever written in the Italian language. New ideas spread. This new way of thinking and style of art quickly spread to other wealthy Italian city-states, such as Rome, Venice, and Milan. This early part of the Renaissance is also called the Italian Renaissance. Italy would become wealthy through trade, and their new ideas soon spread throughout all of Europe.